Army 2 Cent. My name is Paul Emerson, and I'll be doing my homework. I'm way behind my schedule because I've had back pain and I've been procrastinating. Other than that, let's do it. I'm taking programming 2 at Full Sail University. Just got my first grades. I've already got a 75. I've got a few hours if I want to try to fix the grade. And I've got quite a bit of stuff to do. I've got a few hours before class starts, and I need to cook. I need to eat. Listen to this while I cook, while I clean my kitchen and get home, get food done.
Intro. That's me, my last job, and all kinds of things all over. And then I ended up here. Alright. So then all kinds of programming languages. I used to put JavaScript on there, but I don't know why, so I took it off. JavaScript. Don't brag about doing JavaScript. Okay. So I've done all kinds of work all over the country. Did some interesting jobs. The last one was my most fun job. And that's me at my last job. We had AR, VR stuff going. It was a pretty fun job. That was actually my most fun job. What's your name? Where are you? I'll get your attendance tracked for you. Okay. So I've been doing all kinds of things. When I started up, we were making a VR video camera. It was pretty cool. HoloLens, Oculus, this is pretty fun stuff. Then I'm here. Office hours. I do have office hours. It'll be a little different this week because it's the holiday. It kind of changes and shifts based on my schedule. So roughly late afternoon is if you need to contact me. Discord is the quickest way to get in touch with me. I'll be online. I can monitor that most of the time if I'm sitting there. I mean, I do have other job duties, but if I'm sitting there available, I will answer your questions. Online, I don't track any online attendance, so just so you know. All right, so I do have an email, and you can contact me through episode messaging that way, feedback on the assignments. It's just, I don't check my email often. So if you need to get in touch with me quickly, Discord is the best way, all right? Yeah, so that's the best way to get in touch with me. A little bit about you now. We won't make you stand up or anything. I'll do these Slidos. Let's go to the Slido. You're welcome online to join the Slido too. Good morning. What's your name?
I'm gonna cook, but first I have to clean my kitchen. These videos are relatively boring.
Did you say Jerry?
It's mostly just
Okay, I
about
got you.
getting stuff done on a day-to-day basis, dealing with
Home
life.
state.
being an
Anxiety is
adult.
not as home state. Don't stay there. It's okay. Although it feels kind of that way. We get
So I need to clean my kitchen before I can do my homework.
All right, so
Part
let's
of
go. New
life.
York. Hopefully you're not doing it. Delaware, Honduras. I don't know if I've ever had anybody from Honduras before. Cali, we're from Cali. Hopefully, if you're online, California, that's early. I don't think I've had anybody from stuff. It's always a fun exercise. It was last year, before the man tried to like get one of these big hamster wheel things and paddle his way to England. That was the second time to try it. And they arrested me both times. Like, you're not gonna survive this trip. All right. New York is dominating this time. Not sure why. Something happened in New York, everybody's coming down. That's okay. Giants had a good attempt yesterday. Why is it they play better when they get rid of their coach? I don't get it. All right, which is full on degree program? What do they say? Most video games now. Computer science. It's all computer science. And it's all computer science. So when you go to Thanksgiving, family thing, and they just say, oh, you're just playing video games all day, aren't you? Just tell them it's computer science, dad, or uncle, or whoever's complaining about it. It's all computer science. This is the military of the future, right? But the AI doesn't beat us to it. All right, first pass-fail question of the month. See what we got. Yeah, pass, fail, fail. Spider-Man's closed, but you gotta put a hyphen in there, man. Right? It has to have a hyphen and spider, Spider-Man. Groot? Is Groot a superhero? He's just a tree. I like Groot. One good, yeah. Alright, alright. All right, wild card there. Don't get too many Black Canaries. Riddler, that's not a hero. Riddler's fun. He just, I don't know why he keeps fighting Batman. Batman's got the computer. It always solves the riddles. Okay, it's gonna be an okay month, to be honest. I guess you all passed. I can't put this in the episode. All right. A little bit about PG2. Okay. Don't take it too seriously. I like memes. And we'll share some every now and then. Look how small that phone is. We're back to the brick phones now. Now they're going to do the commercials with Steph Curry, right? You know, it's basically a tablet. I guess we should change the Google picture part to now just be ChatGPT, right? How do I PG2? Here's all your assignments. Thanks, AI. You're just like telling us this punchline. No fun. Okay. To be honest, if I see you smiling like that in class, I know something's up, all right? Just don't smile that much. I had a student one month, it was in a small classroom, sitting right in front of me. And during the lecture, all I hear is, like, that's not Visual Studio. Okay, some more. My favorite character. My favorite key on the keyboard is the tab, though. You learn how to use a tab in Visual Studio, you can be super fast. Type tab. That's what I do all the time. Semicolon. It's necessary. It's a necessary evil. Missing a semicolon to take down your application pretty quickly.
Your whole application.
Who's experienced in missing a
Just one.
semicolon? How long did it take you to find the problem? Like, where is the semicolon? These Visual Studio players. Missing curly brace is just as bad. No,
Curly braces is
Visual
probably
Studio has a
worse.
hard time telling you exactly what the problem is. All right, PG2 is still going to be predominantly syntax. Okay, you're still learning. I'm not going to assume that you have any experience programming. Okay, so predominantly it's going to be a lot of syntax. This is how you do this, this is how you call it. There's going to be a level of problem solving on top of that. The industry is a good bit of how do I solve this problem that I'm having to do, okay? So once you get enough experience in the language, you're not going to worry about how do I make a flow. You're not even going to think about that anymore, okay? It's going to be what kind of loop do I use? What's more appropriate to use in this scenario? How do we even solve this problem? I've worked in the industry 25 years. I still encounter things they wanted me to do that I was like, I don't know how to do that. Okay, let me research how to do that, okay? So it's always going to be problem solving on top of that. So there's going to be a level of the lab where just apply what we talked about, but then on top of that is going to be, okay, how do I use what we talked about to solve the problem? So if you kind of like problems and solving problems, those little problem games, puzzle games, then this might be good for you. If you don't like having to solve problems that give you a headache, I don't know what to do. There is some part of the job where you're going to do the same thing over and over again. And you're going to be really fast at doing that. Okay. And there's other parts of the job where, like in my last job, we were like, all right, we're making a camera, 3D kind of camera, generating a lot of depth information. And they're like, okay, now that you can display it, let's have them edit the images in our application. And I'm like, okay, how do I do that? All right, a little bit about PG2. Week 1, methods and vectors. I know you talked about both of these, but we're going to talk about some aspects of both of these that you didn't cover in PG1. All right. Week 1, we're going to be finished with all the material on Wednesday. We're going to cover third day material on Wednesday. Usually the third day of the week is less material, just to give you time to kind of wrap up the lab and turn it in. So we'll be able to finish all the material for week 1 on Wednesday. I will make sure, because of the holiday, that the late penalties don't apply to lab 1. They'll still be due next Monday, but don't worry about late penalties. There won't be any late penalties applied, okay? Those of you online students, you might have a different instructor than me. Make sure that you follow their policies for when something's due and whether or not there'll be late penalties or not. But if you're in my sections, I'll make sure that because of holidays, there won't be any late penalties. So it'll be due on Monday of next week. The cutoff date for the lab will be Wednesday of next week, okay? So just make sure you get something in. We'll cover methods and vectors week 1. Week 2, we'll talk about recursion. Everybody's least favorite loop. algorithms. We'll talk about some algorithms and pseudocode and how to actually use somebody else's solution correctly in my code instead of just taking their code. And we'll talk about a new data structure called the map and how to use it and when to use it compared to a vector. You're going to use a vector for every lab this month. Okay, so if you don't like vectors, I'm sorry, but it's a pretty handy data structure. But sometimes you need a better data structure for doing different things, and the map is good for that too. Week 3 is all about object-oriented programming. We're going to hit classes hard, cover inheritance and polymorphism, and get into pointers and stuff like that. Okay. And week 4, short week. Okay. So there's only 2 days in week 4. We're going to cover file input and output. All right. So that's the materials for the month, kind of high level view of where we're headed. Tutoring. If you need tutoring, Copilot, not the AI Copilot. That's not your tutor. I'm talking about Full Sail's Copilot here. They have it on campus and online. So if you need tutoring, 1, don't be ashamed of it. Okay. 2, take advantage of it. You need it, right? Student support, if you have a letter, I've already seen a couple of them this week. So if you have it, get that to me. We'll make sure everything's set up for you to succeed. Usually everything's pretty open in PG2. All the labs are open right now. You can access whatever materials are there. Okay, all right, we do have a late turn-in policy. This is program-wide, it's not just PG2, okay? So basically when something is due, you have a couple of days to turn something in. So if something's due on Friday, you have until the end of Sunday to submit something for a grade, 48 hours after the due date, okay? That's just the way it is. There will be late penalties applied to days after the due date. So you could be deducted up to 10 points if something is, like, say, submitted on Sunday, so it was due on Friday, submitted on Sunday, you could lose 10 points. After Sunday, it's a 0. Okay, so it's a steep cliff, -5, -5, -100, okay? So it's better just to get something in. Sometimes you just gotta accept it, right, for what it is. We played those games, right? Cyberpunk. I said, forget it. That shit out. Sometimes you gotta do that. Okay, academic dishonor. What's not allowed? No sharing screen. That's hard when you're sitting like elbow to elbow with somebody in the lab, right? But if you look at somebody's solution, basically, you're taking their solution, right? The thing with campus students, what I see a lot of times is that sharing of the screen. And how I know it's happening, even though I don't go to lab, how I know it's happening is when the lab submitted and there's somebody solved something in a novel, incorrect way, and then 3 other people do exactly the same mistake, right? So try not to share your screens or share your code or post your code or download solutions from the internet. AI is not your friend right now. AI is the person that knows all the answers somehow, and they just give it to you easily. You just ask them, hey, sure, here it is. Okay. When you get to the job, you'll probably be expected to maybe use AI to be as quickly as possible. Now, you gotta be careful with AI, because who knows where it's getting its information, right? When you're working for a company, you don't want to open the company up to litigation. So that's where AI, I think, we're still in kind of the early days of it. I think at some point, there will be a litigation war with AI. and companies will not maybe not use it as much, but right now they're just kind of going as fast as they can. AI can help you as a professional go fast. Faster than you could by yourself a lot of times. But as a student, it's just going to give you the answer. If you don't know how to do something, and you just ask AI what's the solution, it's just going to give it to you, you haven't figured it out. Okay. So there's this, use it but not now. All right. I know it's tempting. Now, Visual Studio has Copilot. If you're typing and Visual Studio is telling you what to type next, you need to turn that off. Okay. It's just helping you way too much. What is allowed? General discussion of the problems, general discussion of syntax, right? Giving some hints, right? I use nested loops, for example. Somebody needs to know what a nested loop is and know how to use it, right? But if you're sitting there telling somebody else what to type, then, well, you're not really helping them, right? So it's tricky. It's tricky. How to get help, Copilot, obviously, not the AI, but the singer. Campus labs for your campus students, you have 3 labs a week, 4 hours each, 12 hours of campus lab help. That's more than enough time to solve the problem. There's also an open lab, the Zoom lab sessions, another 12 hours of lab instructor help. So basically 24 hours of lab instructor help every week. The students who do the worst, 1, they don't know what they're doing, and 2, they don't ask for help. It's okay if you don't know what you're doing, all right? But if you don't know what you're doing, you're stuck and you don't ask for help, just ask for help, okay? At some point, you know, sometimes I see students repeat, and it's just, they never ask for help. I ask them how it's going, they said everything's going fine. It's not going fine. Okay. Just tell me what you're stuck with. Just kind of swallow that pride a little bit, right? It's okay if you don't know what's going on. I expect you to not know what's going on. So I expect you to have questions. Okay, if you're serious, we've seen this, right, on Full Sail's wall. We, lab instructors, course directors, we'll take you seriously. If you ask for help, we'll give you help, right? All right, that's me in my last job again. Let's look at the course real quick, just to get a preview of it. I don't want a new tab. Okay, course essentials. This is where you get more information about the course, the schedule of things, course information. We have a couple of assignments in here. And we'll give you some time to work on finish this GitHub assignment because that's how we get all of our coding materials for the month, okay? Professionalism is a 10% of your grade kind of assignment. For campus students, that'll be finalized the last day of the month, okay? Because attendance is part of that. There's also a couple of parts of that, Discord participation and a profile picture, 2 screenshots you'll need to post, okay? All right. PG2 rules, we always get people asking, is this allowed, is that allowed? There's a good place to go to get your questions answered. There's some requirements in here, some debugging requirements that you'll need to fulfill for the course, okay? Here's that late turn-in policy again. So if you're curious about, am I allowed to do this? What am I allowed to do? What am I not allowed to do? I think PG1 had a long list of things you weren't allowed to use. That's smaller in PG2, but there's still some things you're not allowed to use because they're more intermediate level, not PG2 level, okay? If I see it, unfortunately, I'll have to deduct quite a few points for it. Okay. Thankfully, there are some things that are allowed now that you weren't allowed to use in PG1, like auto and const and references. Okay, so make your job a little easier. There's a section of frequently asked questions broken out by topic, okay? Course questions, some Visual Studio questions. Every now and then get somebody said, my license isn't, just go here. Okay, GitHub questions. We're gonna use GitHub to manage our code, all right? So if you don't know what GitHub is, welcome to the party, okay? We'll introduce GitHub. We're not going to do anything crazy with it. You will use GitHub again a couple more times at Full Sail. So the introduction here will help you get started with that. And then there's some frequently asked questions about each of the labs. So if you have an issue with the lab, look at the facts just to see if it's covered in those questions. And then each of these week modules follow the same pattern. We have a getting started that kind of tells you where the materials are, but then there's a lecture and a part of the lab. Okay. These cover the materials for all the lectures, and then the instructions for each part of the lab that the lecture applies to. Then there's one lab assignment. So this is different than PG1. There's only one lab that's due each week. You don't have to turn in part A of lab 1. You just turn in the completed lab, okay? So each of these lectures will have a part of a lab that it applies to. And then all the instructions in there, inside of each of these, you'll find the lecture slides that apply to this lecture video. The lecture video is a little bit old, so I'm kind of morphing the material a bit, but still covering the same topics. Sometimes you need to hear a topic discussion different ways, right? Sometimes it helps. There's also some links if you need to jump to a specific topic in the video. There's a link to that topic where it starts, make it a little bit easier so you don't have to scrub a long video, right? Who likes scrubbing? No, I'm not gonna do that. Okay? So if you're like, I forgot how to erase in a vector, let me just jump right here rather than scrubbing for it. There's an optional quiz. Actually, campus students, we're going to be missing one lecture for the month. Okay, so we got to make up that lecture somehow. I'm going to ask that campus students do all the lecture quizzes for week 1, all these optional lecture quizzes, okay? So that we'll kind of make up for that lost lecture time. And then it follows the lab instructions. There'll be a video that shows you how the lab should work if it's done correctly. So you get a visual. If you're like me, I kind of need a picture. Show me what it should look like, and then I'll make it look like that, right? And then into the instructions. All right. So that's, each of the weeks follows that, and then there's also a quiz for each week that covers the material for the week. All right? So let's see. December 1st, that is next Monday. Okay, yeah, they all stay the same. I'll change this due date for the quiz so that it's next Monday as well, okay? So you can take it whenever you want to. I know that you'll just be stuck in your face. Okay? You'll be like, I don't want to think about code. So the question line, do we have multiple attempts for quizzes? No. Okay. One attempt. Quizzes, they're all multiple choice, okay? All right, now, job interviews, part of what we want to do at Full Sail is help prepare you for these job interviews. Job interviews are like an oral exam and a coding test. So it's not fun in our industry to do a job interview. It's not just a training session with somebody where we just talk about You can use those optional lecture quizzes to kind of prep you for the actual quiz, all right? They're good prep for the quizzes, for the actual graded quiz. Any questions about the course? It's different than PG1, right? So you don't have to submit something until next week. It doesn't mean you can go to sleep for a week. It's not something you can just, unless you've been coding for a while, it's not something you can just do quickly. Okay? So give yourself some time to do it. All right. For the rest of this hour, I want you to work on this GitHub assignment. Finish this GitHub assignment so you can get the materials for the month. Okay? You'll need a GitHub account. It's okay to use any email you want for the GitHub account. If you already have a GitHub account, it's okay to use that GitHub account. Okay? You're setting up your account and you see a screen like this. Just say just me and not applicable. Even though you are a student, they just typical way sometimes to set up with that account. So just say just me and not applicable. You'll need to accept this GitHub assignment, GitHub Classroom assignment. This will create a repo folder or repository using the materials for the month. Then follow the steps to clone the repo locally, make some changes, make sure you can upload and that kind of stuff. All right. So we'll start back up with the materials at 10 o'clock, 10 a.m. our time. Make sure you get this assignment set up. I'll come around, see how it's going, make sure you get it done. And go ahead and, this is 5% of your grade, easy 5%, all right? You'll need to upload some screenshots, so there's quite a few steps to get this, and then sometimes there's some things that stop it from going forward. So I'll come around, see how it's going. All right, so I'll go ahead and pause the video. I'll pause it. So what's going to happen? You're going to work on the machine, make some changes, test it. You're going to get tested. Get it into GitHub. I will grade your code in GitHub. You will need to submit the zip files from GitHub. You do not have to create a zip file yourself. Okay? GitHub, you can download the whole zip, the whole repo, that's fine. It's only like 30 minutes, not a big deal. Okay? So, I will grade your code in GitHub. Put comments directly on your lines of code, so that you can see, what the context of my messages are. Give you a link to that in FSO. You will need to put the zip in FSO just so that Full Sail has an archive of what you've done, right? There's no guarantee that these repos will be around for a long time. So that's why we're going to still need you to submit the zip file. But you do not need to zip it up yourself. If you zip it up yourself, it could cause problems. Because a lot of times students will put that in their repo and it's too big for GitHub. Because they zip up everything, all the debugging information and all that big stuff, okay? So that's the process you're going to follow. Make some changes, commit, push, move on to the next section, okay? Do not do only one commit for the whole app. You have to get you into the process of working on something, getting it working, push it up to the repo, okay? You don't want to be sitting on a lot of code for like a month. Your machine crashes, you tell your manager, sorry, I lost my whole month of work, like, not good. thing I want you to do, I want to show you in the repo, okay, in the root of your repo, I did the whole process. I cloned the repo myself, okay. In the root of your repo, the root folder, there's a couple of files that you might find helpful, okay. The PG2 topics, the things we're going to cover this month. These two are basically the same thing, except they're organizing the data a little differently. So they're markdown files. Okay, so if you drag that to like Chrome, you can actually view these markdown files. Now, you might need an extension. Here's a markdown viewer extension that I'm using in Chrome, okay? And it shows you the topics that we're going to cover for the month, all right? There's the rules for PG2. No, why is that doing it? I'll fix that. Why? Why did I show you? General fact. Okay, something doesn't work. We gotta look at this, make sure that's fine. Okay, some facts about the labs anyway. So week 1, topics we're gonna cover in week 1. Now, we're gonna cover down to here. So starting here down to vectors today, okay? It's a lot of material. Sometimes you might want to see the same information, but maybe not broken out, and maybe you forget what day we covered it or when we covered it. Broken it out by topic for everything we're going to do with methods, okay, this month. So it's like, oh, I forgot about how I do default parameters, what day was that on? You don't have to care. Just find default parameters, okay? All right. So this is in the root of your repo. So I'm just going to use this to kind of guide us on what we're going to cover. Okay, so we're kind of like slides, but easier to digest, I think. All right. All right, we're going to talk about different ways to call methods. Where we're headed for, let me show you where. Let's see if this is going to work. I have a public lecture code repo. So as I'm working on code, I might go a little too fast. I'll go a little too fast. Okay, so if I get ahead of you and you're not quite sure how I did something, yours isn't working, mine is, then you can go to my lecture code repo. You'll have to remind me to push it in, okay? But what I'm going to do, that one. If you've seen this little trick, I've showed some of you. In your Git Changes tab, if you need to jump to your repo at GitHub quickly, you can open it up and say open in browser in your Git Changes tab, okay? It'll open up your repo. Now, your repos are all private. That means only you and other instructors at Full Sail can see it. Students and anybody else outside of that group cannot see it. My lecture code repo is going to be public so that you can actually get to it. So where do we see that information? All right. Let's see. We have a GitHub questions channel in Discord. Okay. GitHub questions. I'm going to post my repo here. Into my lecture code repo. Okay. So if you need to get to my code, see what I've done, then you can find this pin message. I'll pin it here. Pin, there. Go to GitHub questions, find my lecture code repo, and you can see the code that I've been working on, okay, during the lectures. Oh, there it is. Okay. So this is my lecture code repo. We're going to talk about how to call static versus non-static methods. How do I actually execute those codes? And they're different based on how they are created, static versus non-static, okay? So non-static methods, these are methods that are, we're gonna be working a lot with classes, okay? Very little bit about in global methods. We're going to be working a lot about with class methods. So to call a non-static method as part of a class, there are some requirements to that. You need an object of that class so that you can call a method. You cannot call a method without an object of the class. Okay? They can access the parts of the class, the static and non-static parts. Now, you'll need an instance variable. Now, what does that mean? What does that look like? Here is a simple student class. We have some private data, a couple of methods. These are non-static methods, and you can tell that we do not see the static keyword. A lot of times when you're working with classes, you don't know if something's static or not. You don't even know what's available in the class. You will want to open up the header file so that you can see what's available, what you can do. All right? So you'll open that up and we'll see, okay, here's a method called setDetails. It's non-static. There's a method called display. It's non-static. So I know by that information how to talk to these methods. How do I actually call and do something with it? So anytime it's non-static, you will need an instance of that class, an object of that type. Okay, so I'll need to create a student variable. I'll call it S1, that's very creative. Be better with your variable names in this example, okay? I should change that to Steve. So, or Alice. So we set the details on this object. Notice how we call these non-static methods. We use the object dot the name of the method. We don't use a student class name, we use the object to call it. So if you have a non-static method, this is what is required to call these two methods. If I have a separate student, another student object, I would call it on that variable. So because that student will probably have a different name, a different age. I was hoping that's not the grade. Yeah, the age. Okay. So that student would have different names and different ages. Okay, so that is how you would call a non-static method. Static methods are different kinds of methods. They're not really specific to one object. They're related to the whole class. Okay? And so therefore, you don't need an object to call them because they're related at the class level. These methods have some limitations, and we'll talk about them in week 1, or week 3, I mean, when we get more into classes and object-oriented programming. Okay? We'll talk about what it really means with this pointer and what the restrictions are on static methods. But if I open up a class and I see the static keyword, that tells me very specifically how do I communicate to this block of code and how do I actually call it. As a developer, if I see static, I'm like, okay, I don't need to create an object for this class to actually call this particular method. It's at the class level. So the way to access these static methods is through counter, not through an object of counter. So the main difference is how we call them, okay? Very different syntax. We use the name of the class, these 2 colons. I'm not sure why they needed 2. Why isn't 1 sufficient? Because we don't use colons. Well, we do use colons in other places. So, but why 2? It's just extra typing. I don't know. But this is the scope resolution operator. It tells the compiler, I want to call this method, what class is it part of? So inside of this counter scope, look for this method. So I don't have to create an object or a variable called counter type. I just call these methods directly on the class. You will see a lot of helper methods like this. Okay. All right, so some key differences between these. Non-static, you need an object. Static, you need a class name. Sometimes this pointer, we'll talk more about that in week 3, and what it can access and what it can't access. So, yes. You can call a static from an object variable. C++ will let you do that, but it's not required. Okay, so in day 1, let's see an example. Where's the collection for repo? Just by looking at this, what does this tell us what kind of method it is? It's a static method, right? I can go, we provided some helper classes for you to make some of your tasks a little easier this month. The console class is a helper class that we provided for you. You can find those under the miscellaneous folder. There's a console and an input class, okay? Now, if you don't know what you can do on those, open up the header files to see what's available. Here's console class. I can just look at that and tell how to call these methods, right? There's that keyword. The good thing about using a bunch of static helper methods like this is to call this particular method, I don't have to first create console class or a variable called console, right, to do anything with it. Now, if I did, I can call all these methods on it, but this step isn't necessary for static methods. All right. So static, here's a static example. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. So console, you can look at here. Here's a bunch of methods we provided for you to do certain things, okay? You've seen that sample code in day 1 of how to do some of this stuff, right? How do you call some of these rights, right line? The difference between right and right line is what it does with the cursor. Now, what do I mean by cursor? It's the blinking cursor in the console window, okay? Wherever that cursor is, the thing you print will start at that location. So you can actually move that cursor around. How can I do that? Set cursor position. I can change the X and Y, the column and row. I can just change the column position, horizontal position of the cursor if I want to. I can get the size of the window to know my limitations, my bounds. I can set some colors. If I want to set some colors on the thing that gets printed. Okay, and then some methods to do the writing. So the write will just print out whatever you ask it to print, and then wherever it stops, that's where the cursor is. The write line will print whatever I ask it to print, and then move the cursor to the beginning of the next row. Okay, so basically just print a new line at the end of this. The input class is a somewhat helpful class to get some input from the user, so you don't have to manage any of that input stream. If I need a string from the user, I just call this method, pass in whatever message I want to show to the user, and get a string back from whatever the user types. Okay, you can play around with that in a minute. There's a getInteger method, print out the message and then return the integer that the user types in if it fits within the range that you tell it to limit it to. Okay, we'll look at some examples. Those are all static methods as well. Okay, so you've seen some static methods, how to call static methods. Let's do some coding here. Where are we trying to head to? I'll show you where we're trying to head to. I wrote a little sample method just to show you kind of what we're looking for, to play around with these console methods. So basically, something like this, all right? So it gives you to, how do I solve this problem? How do I move the cursor around? How do I set some colors? How do I print something out, randomly positioned in the window? Okay. the console's not a great window. It's got some issues, but I'm gonna do something like this, right? We got the console class. The console class can print things. The console class can set colors. The console class can move the cursor around. Okay, this is just a while true loop, just moving the cursor, printing something, printing that color, setting the color, and then printing a space. That's all it's doing. What's that? How do I generate a random value? I'm going to look at a very simple, old school way to do that. Okay. There is. Have any of you ever heard of the RAND method? It's old school. So RAND.
Random.
This generates a random number from 0 to 32,767.
And there's no such thing as a random number.
That's my range.
String of numbers that it cycles
I have
through.
some code here. You want to put some code here. You need to resize your window to a certain size so that this information works correctly. Okay, big window width, big window height. RAND will generate a random number from this range. Obviously, our window is not that big, right? How do we limit a number to a specific range?
Using a different, like a boolean or a float or a
No.
long.
Says divide the number by a certain range, by the max value, multiplied by the range. It's one way. Anybody know of another way?
By using this data type.
We talked about this operator. one. What's that operator? Modulo, right?
Oh, yeah.
What does that do? Gives you the remainder of dividing by a certain number, right? So modulo num returns the remainder after dividing by num. So if I want to limit any number in a certain range, then I can just modulo that number. Depends if you want inclusive or not inclusive. So the range would be 0 to num minus 1. Why num minus 1? Because if it was divisible by num, it can't return num as a remainder, right? So it'll return num minus 1. So if you want to include num, then you have to do num plus 1. So if I want to range between 0 and 100, I would have to do modulo 101. Right? Okay, does everybody know the task we're trying to do? Write a method to do that. You can put it up here. I put mine, I called it sample. You'll need to resize your window to a certain specific size. So print while true. Now, how do I set the colors? These console colors are pretty limited. Okay. This is a flat red, but if you want to set it to a specific red number, a red color, you can set to a specific R value, red value. Okay. Now in the console window, that could be limited from 0 to 255. That's the range for our red channel. Okay. So you got some boundaries here. You got our requirements is that's where we're headed. This can give us some practice for calling these methods, working with static methods, just getting used to the RAND function, reminding yourself width and arcs. Okay. Use this technique. You can write a method above main to do that, and then call it here. Alright. Give us some practice calling these static methods and learning how to use this console class. Now, I'll give you about 10-15 minutes to work on it. Let me know if you have questions. Okay. And then we'll go over the solution. Okay. Remind yourself that, the beginning of learning anything new is always the hardest. Okay. So, if you're sitting there like, that's okay, struggle, right? Then it's okay. Just cut yourself some slack. It's Sunday morning. New stuff. Okay. So, what do we do? If I want to write a method to do this, I'll go ahead and work through it together with you. So, void. What does void mean as a return type? It's not returning anything, right? So let's do random colors, whatever. Do I need any parameters for this method? Do I need to send any data to it? No. So empty parentheses, I'm not passing any data to it. This tells a compiler creating a method, a function to do something. In my curly braces, what kind of loop do you use? Do while? Well, no one never uses do while. I don't know why. It could work. It could work in this case too. Do while true or while true. Okay. What does this tell me? What does a while true tell me? It'll run indefinitely, right? Until I tell it to stop. How do I get out of a while true loop? Return work. What else? Break statement, right? So if I want to track how long I've been doing this, let's say I want to track time-wise or number of loops or something. If I wanted to track, let's say, looping 10,000 times, then I want to get out of it. I could do that, right? While true. So what do I want to do to start this? We've set the window size to be this. I need to know the boundaries, right? So I need to actually get those boundaries and store them. I could get them over and over again, but repeatedly calling a method that's not going to change a value is not going to help us that much. So what methods do I need? I need the get window width and get window height methods to call. Those are going to return integers. So when I look at a header, I like specifically for this information, and it'll tell me how do I communicate to that block of code. Okay, so I'm going to store those in separate variables at the top here. How do I call that particular method? How do I get the width of the console? Console : get window width. So I'll give you the horizontal size. I can get the console get window height. Okay. Some of you were like, I didn't know you could do this. Yeah, I could do that. And because I'm calling methods, a lot of times I will put them on separate lines as well. Sometimes I'll put it on the same line depending on the mood I'm in. Sometimes this is a bit long, so I might put them on separate lines just so they're not taking up too much horizontal space. I'm also going to keep track and randomly generate a position, right? An X and Y position. You can also think of these as columns and rows. Graphical, we usually think of it in X and Y positions. And this will be, I randomly set a position in the window. I'm gonna use this rand function to generate a random position. I'm gonna let this be my boundary, my upper boundary, okay? Width and height are my upper boundaries. Lower boundaries for the console are zeros. Zero is an acceptable lower boundary. In fact, the range is 0 to width minus 1. So it's kind of like an array or a vector, right? Your indexes are 0 based. How would I generate a random X position? The width, right? Y equal to rand mod height. Okay. How do I use this information to move the cursor in the window? Sometimes I forget. I don't like memorizing a lot of stuff. So if I forget, I'll just do console : and see what's available. And I'll scroll and I'll say, what was that name of that method called again? Oh yeah, set cursor position. Then I can use my X and Y. Move the cursor. How do I generate a random red color? How do I do that? Well, the valid range is 0 to 255. Okay. So rand mod 256. Right? I could store this in a variable instead of hard coding in here. Now, if I look back at those methods, there's a set background color where I can pass the individual components of a color, red, green, and blue components. So here's my red component. Console set background color. So just red, and that can just be zeros and zeros. All right. Learning how to call static methods. Just using the class, I don't need to create a console variable to use these methods. Now, I said you can use write or cout, okay? So console write and just print out a space. The background color affects whatever you print next. So after the loop, I'm going to, even though we don't have a way to get out of the loop, I'm going to reset the colors. No, I don't want to do it twice. I only want to do it once. This is for resetting the color. So we can't get to this line of code currently because we don't have a way to get out of this loop. We can put that in later if we want to. So how do I call this particular method? Copy paste. I don't like typing, as you can see. I'm not very good at it. Don't be good at a bad job. Who likes typing? Okay, good, no one. You're gonna do a lot of typing in your career. Who's heard of carpal tunnel syndrome? That's from repetitive stress injury, which I had a coworker in my last job, he had to wear like a little brace at work all the time. So you don't want that. Don't type if you don't have to type. Okay. It's worth, if you didn't get to this far, just take this code and digest it later. Go through and say, why did this work? Why did this do what? Questions? Calling the static methods. Okay, you're going to encounter a lot of static methods in your code. I'm going to push this to my lecture code repo. Random colors, fingers, calling static methods. Now that message that I put in commits, whatever message you put, I don't read students' messages in their commits. You can name them, you can put any kind of message there. When you get to your job, if you're using Git or some other, a lot of times you're going to want that message to be descriptive of what you did. In fact, they're going to require it to be. So if you fixed a bug, put the bug number there so they can refer back to why you fixed the code. Right? Or if you added a new feature, right? Added double jump. Is that? You can push it. Get in the habit of committing and pushing. When you finish something, get it working. Okay? It's a good practice to get into. It's kind of a way to kind of push it to another server so that, hey, if something bad happens to your machine, that code is backed up. Okay? So calling static methods is simply, you just need the class name, colon, whatever method you want to call. Right? These methods can be helpful for you this month, right? Setting colors, writing different things. Okay. Yes. It depends. Did you actually set the window size? Yeah, you need to set the resize the window. The console is not the best output window. It's got its issues, but what about calling non-static methods? We have a menu class in our project. Let's open up the menu class, take a look at it. We're going to use it to kind of refresh ourselves about vectors a little bit. We're going to use vectors a lot, so we're going to remind ourselves how to use vectors. So there's a menu class. It's empty. Got a public and a private section. Let's put a vector in the private section, okay? We want it just to hold our menu items. Standard vector, standard string, our menu items. Yeah, what's the problem here? What did I do? I just typed one line. If you're not quite sure, if you haven't got to this place where you just know it already, you need to include the vector header. Isn't coding like this? You fix one problem and another one pops up. It's kind of like a whack-a-mole, right? It's like, oh no, there's another problem. Well, it's still another header that I need. I need the string header. Okay, so we have a vector menu item. I want to add to this vector. I need a public method to call something on this particular class to add a menu item. Okay. Void add menu item. Does it need any parameters? Yeah, I probably need to tell it what to add, right? What's the type of my parameter? String. That's what the vector's holding. So that's what I want to pass to this particular method item to add. We're also going to learn How to create methods correctly inside of a class. A declaration versus a definition. Okay? Creating methods. Declaration versus a definition. When you add methods to a class or functions to a class, most of the time in C++, you want to separate them. You want to separate the definition, which is the code, from the declaration. Now, the declaration just describes the signature of the function, the method. I use method and function kind of interchangeably, right? So this part is the function or method signature. How do I talk to this block of code? Is basically what it describes. It describes the return type, the name, and any parameters. Now, a declaration is the function signature. We end it with a semicolon here.
Hello.
I do not put code breaks.
I'm doing homework. I was just in the kitchen.
Class methods will be separated between a declaration and a definition.
Huh?
There are
Yeah.
some that you will see defined in the header file. This is the header file,
I see you said
menu.h.
you worked tomorrow, and I responded no.
Most of them will be split. We will separate the definition, which is the
So it'll
code,
probably be, I'm behind because of my
from the
background.
declaration. But the class,
So it'll be after 9 p.m.
Okay, cool.
Yes. Right.
class declaration, this is the class declaration. We're declaring a new type called menu. What can it do? Is there any data that describes that object? And that's what we put inside of the class declaration. What can the class do? Well, we can add a menu item to the menu. We don't put the code here. The reason is, when we want to use this class, we include the menu.h file. We don't want to include the code along with it. You might have IP. You might have things you don't want people to know how you're doing something. Okay? Libraries, if you have a library that let other people use, you will give them a header, you won't give them your code. Okay? And it's also a build issue. If you put all your code inside the header file, if you need to make updates, what do? You have to edit the header file. And what does that impact? It impacts everywhere that includes the header file. And the build system would have to rebuild everything that included that header file if you change the code inside the header file. So we separate the interface of the class from the code of the class so that you can keep modifying the code without having to require other things to be rebuilt. One of my jobs, we had a product that was 5 million lines of code, and it took 3.5 hours to build, to do a full rebuild. Do rebuilds all the time. I know PG1 might have told you rebuild everything, but don't rebuild everything, please. That's going to slow you down. We don't like slow developers. We like fast developers. Okay? As a manager, I appreciate it when my developers got things done early. That way we can see if something was broken versus the night of the build is due, whatever. This is the declaration. It just describes that this class has a method called add menu item. Let me add the definition for this, the actual code for this block. A lot of times, if I'm going to do it manually, I don't like typing. I screw it up, okay? So I would copy this line. Do not copy the semicolon, okay, because that's going to mess you up. Go to the CPP file. I'm going to put this side by side so we can see them, okay? I'm I'm gonna paste it in. Here's where the code braces go. Now, I need something to tell the compiler that this block of code goes along with this declaration. They're kind of a pair. I need to tell the compiler something to make sure the compiler knows that they go together. What this definition needs is this scope. I need to put the class name, colon, colon, on the front of the definition, on the method name. Okay. Do not forget to do this part. If I forget to do this part, I would get a weird kind of field error if I try to use it. Now, Visual Studio is slow sometimes. It's still showing a green line here. It'll eventually go away. Green is usually associated with good, right? Green grass, green light. Green swing in Visual Studio is not good. It should be yellow. I don't know why it's good. Okay. It'll eventually go away if I build this fodder. Let's see. I get a little hints when I see the red lines and the green line. Anybody else like me? Every time that red line shows up, you get a little shaky. Like, what did I do? What did I do? Please go away. It's still there. Thank you, Visual Studio, for making me a little nervous. Okay. Do not forget to add this part to your definition. It's important. Let's add the code. How do I add this item to my vector? Keep your say menu item. So the question is, can we reference this one? It's private. Well, this block of code is associated with this class. If I didn't put this on here, it wouldn't know anything about this vector, because this would technically be a global function. But I need to tell it that it's part of that class so that it has access to those members of the class. All right, I still get the green line here. I'm a little freaked out about that. Like Visual Studio, come on, man. I know you can do this. Okay. This is a non-static method. Let's call this method in our day one CPP. I'm going to comment random colors out because that's a while true loop. I don't want it to block my app. Okay, I need to create a menu. Okay. The problem is it's undefined. How do I define it? Which one do I include? Always include header files. Do not include CPP files. Thank you, Visual Studio, for showing me the wrong option. What happens if I include that one? I'll include this block of code again. Everything's green now. What happens if I build this now? Oh, gee. I'll get an already defined error. Okay. Some of you are going to see that. If you see something that says already defined, you're probably including a CPP file. Do not include CPP files. Always include header files. What's that? So yeah, the question is, isn't that always, that's why we have this in our header file, to tell the compiler only include it once. Otherwise, we have multiple definitions or declarations of this type. Okay, we create our cafe. How do I add a menu item? I have to call it on the object. I can't do menu : Well, it gives me the option, but it won't work. Okay, why does it give me the option when it knows it won't work? I don't know, you have to ask Visual Studio. Why are you doing that, Visual Studio? Okay. You might see this error message this month. A non-static member reference must be relative to a specific object. Thank you for using big words to confuse me. Basically, it's just saying I need an object to call this method because it's non-static. Okay, that's why I need cafe dot. Okay, what do we need on our menu? Coffee for sure. What else? What's that? Tea. I didn't know we had a British person. What else? Throw it out. Sorry. Muffins. Where's the muffins? What kind of muffins? Very classic. Very muffins. No one else is hungry. I saw an ad for a spicy McMuffin. Anybody else see that?
Let's go look at my.
Spicy McMuffin. What about the McGriddle? Anybody like the McGriddle?
The universe has permanence. Let's go see my screen. This may be on alone. This is just a jar of water. I don't think there's anything in this. Nope. Nothing's in it. The plant fell over. There's still a few bugs. I'm still thriving. Here's the $100 bill. Here's the $5 bill. Nothing's really changed.
Always makes me hungry. Just bacon. What? Do you need more? That's implied. Bacon is plural, right? You don't say, give me some bacons. I like that it's plural. Thank you, English, for making that obvious. No, he's just one. Anyway. Okay, this is how I'm going to add a bunch of items to our menu. These are all non-static, so the way to call it is on the object. We can have a totally separate menu object. Or, I don't know, what are we going to call it? McD's. And McD's has, I can type, which I can't. McD's. I think I'd be good at it after all this time. McGriddle. It would have its own vector, its own item. Right? McMuffin. Is it really a muffin? No, I guess it's an English muffin, right? So we'll make muffin. Look at my spell checker knows that McGriddle's fine, but it doesn't like McMuffin. I don't know. These are two separate cafes, two separate menus. Okay. Non-static means I'm requiring an object to call it. We've been going for a little while without a break. Why don't we take a break? I kind of get going sometimes. Let's take a 10-minute break. All right. So So this is how we add a particular method to a class, how we split out the declaration from the definition, okay? That's important to get used to because most of your classes, interesting classes, are going to have complicated functions inside of them. You want to make sure you get used to splitting them out from the declaration and the definition, okay? Do not forget that class scope resolution on the front of your definition method name, okay? That will cause all kinds of problems if you leave it off. So we have a vector inside of a class, and we have an ability to add something to our vector. Let's practice creating this declaration and definition. Add a method called show menu that's going to print out what's on a menu. Okay, so one, it's going to get some practice doing this declaration definition. Two, refresh yourself on how to loop over a vector and access the items inside the vector. Okay, so add a method. Add a method to show the menu. And then call it in main. Call it after we add a bunch of menu items. Okay? So this one might be your first time creating a declaration and a definition. I think in PG1 they just put everything in the header file or everything in the CPP file, right? So get used to separating it out. So spend a couple of minutes, print out your menu. Okay, what should the declaration look like? Everybody agree that void is the return type? Okay. What do we call it? Show, I'll call it show menu. Don't need any parameters. Vector of string. Well, we already have the vector. The vector is inside of our class. So we're going to use this vector instead, so we don't need to pass in a vector. Okay. I'll show you a little Visual Studio trick to help you create the definition faster. Here's the thing with Visual Studio tips. They only work in Visual Studio. So you need to know how to do them manually, but be as fast as possible with the tool. Part of that is because, well, you might not have Visual Studio on the job, or in the job interview. One of your first job interviews will have to be coding for somebody else watching you, and that might be an online thing, which it will not be Visual Studio. So you'd be like, where's the shortcut for doing this? Okay, so you need to know how to do it manually, but I'll show you how to use Visual Studio as well. Here's this little screwdriver. The screwdriver, if you open it up, allows you to create a definition in the CPP file. So it's going to give me an empty definition quickly, so I don't have to copy and paste anything. And it's going to give me the correct scope resolution on the front of this. I like it when the tool can help me be faster. But don't get too dependent on the tool where you can't do it manually. All right. What kind of loop did you use? The do while? No, do while is not appropriate. Why? If the vector is empty, you would get a problem. Okay? So, do while is not always applicable. Even though it is a fun loop to use. Okay. What's that? You can use a for each. I didn't say no for each. So Alexander Online says 4. Most of you probably just went straight 4, right? I'll show you several loops that we can use, okay? So let's do this. Let's do the basic 4 loop. Right. What's your name? What's your name? Foster. Make sure you at least get to the second half. Okay. So regular for loop, int I equals 0, I less than what? And you know, items that size, right? You did that enough in PG1, right? To be burned into that the cortex. Okay. How do I access each item inside the vector? There's a couple of ways to do it. How do I do it? Menu items. Not in the middle there. Fingers betray me. Menu items. There's a couple ways you can use the square brackets with the I as the indexer, postscript operator, or you can use the at method with the index. Since I'm showing you both ways, you can use both ways. Okay. I'm old school, so I use the square brackets. At provides us, we'll throw in a specific exception if it's outside of me. Yeah. I'll know, why does every line that I type have a red line on it? Every time I type something, there's always a red. In Visual Studio, can we get along here? Just add the thing I need to add. Just do it for me. One day. One day. So I need the header, IO stream, or C out. Okay. Let's print out a little, sometimes the tooltips get in the way, I can't see it. See out, I'll do a for loop. I'll put a little header so we know the difference in the output. Okay? I'm going to show you different ways to loop over this vector. I think there's only one way. There's multiple ways. Okay. There's also the for each. What's a for each? I prefer a for each, or sometimes called a range-based loop. Okay, so this is a for each. There's our that suspicious auto word that would have gotten you a lot of points taken off last month, right? Anybody get dinged by that? You're probably just scared not to use it, right? Don't ever use it. I will let you use it this month. It's going to be really obvious in week 2 when we use the map why they invented the auto keyword. Okay. Auto is just telling the compiler, you go figure it out. I'm tired of typing kind of situation, right? Yeah. Yeah, math is like the dictionary. Okay. The for each says, for each item in this container, give me a variable for each item in the container. Okay, so every time you go through the loop, it's going to fill this variable with the value of the next item. I is a terrible name for a variable in this case. In this case, I is okay for loops, but in this case, I'm just going to call it the menu item. That makes more sense. Auto is just a replacement telling the compiler to figure out what the type is. What's the type of this variable menu item? It's a string. It's not auto. The compiler is telling the compiler automatically figure it out. So it's really standard string. Okay. But who wants to type this? I don't want to type that. We'll talk about this on Wednesday. This is a reference. Okay. You will be allowed and required to use the reference this month. If you don't use it correctly or in the appropriate places, you will lose points. So we're going to learn how to use the reference correctly this month. All right. Asterisk means a pointer, which we'll get to in week 3. All right, for now, I did you might have said, how's he typing some of this so fast? I'm using code snippets. So I started typing 4, and Visual Studio recognizes that's a code snippet in the C++ language, at which point I can hit tab, and it gives me the structure of a for loop without having to type everything. The range-based loop is R4. If you know what the code snippet is, then I can type R4 tab, and it fills out the basic structure of a range-based loop. And then you can change the variable names to make it mean more. Code snippets are one of those use your tool quickly kind of thing, which will not be in other tools the same way. So don't get too dependent, but get fast. All right, here's a range base. How do I print out the items? Well, now I can just simply see out the menu because I have it. I don't have to look it up again. Now, those are only 2 options. Well, there's another kind of loop using something that's called an iterator. So I'm going to copy this and iterator for loop. Now, what are iterators? Iterators. Iterators are objects that point to items inside of your container. I'm using generic terminology because iterators in the standard library are used for all kinds of containers. And the way we use them mean the same way. An iterator knows how to move through the container that you're using. Now, a vector is what kind of a container? A vector. It's storing its data sequentially in a contiguous block of memory. Okay? It's very important to understand that because that's how it gets its speed. Contiguous meaning each string that we put into this vector is right next to each other in memory. All right? So, the iterator knows how to go from one item to the next item inside that container. If I just say, here's my iterator, and I go plus plus, it knows to go from the first one to the second one. If I have another kind of container called, let's say, a map, which we'll learn about next week, is a tree. It's structured like this. It's a binary search tree, so it's more structured like that. Okay. So, it's not sequential. But if I say iterator on a map, plus plus, it knows how to go from one node to the next. Okay? You don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about how the structure is built. You just use the iterator. The iterator knows how to do it. Then you say, iterator, give me the item that you're pointing at. Okay? So, the benefit to iterators is the way you use them is the same across all the different kinds of containers. The problem with iterators is they're kind of wordy, and it's a little bit confusing sometimes. So let's look at an iterator. Let's say I had a vector that holds integers. How would I get an iterator for that vector? Well, I have to define the type of vector that it's in, and then do colon iterator. See what I say by being wordy? That's a lot of typing there, right? Now, how do I get an iterator to something that's inside of my vector? There's a lot of different things you can do with an iterator. Begin gives you an iterator to the first element, much like index what? 0. End gives you an iterator to what? You would think to the last item. That would be logical. That's not what it gives you. What does size give you? the number of items, is it a valid index? There's one beyond the last index, right? What does n give you? Not the last item, but the item after the last item. Very similar to size. Okay? What's that? N, if I did n minus 1, it gives me the last time. It'll iterate to the last time. I can use plus plus on the iterator, and it moves to the next element regardless of the kind of structure it is. Iterator minus minus moves to the previous element. I can jump to a specific position in the container, or I can move backwards to a specific position. Okay? The iterator is not the value. It points to the value, so to get to the value that it's pointing to, it must dereference the object. Now, if anybody knows anything about pointers, it sounds like this is a pointer because I'm using points and dereference. But, I mean, internally it is a pointer, but the object itself is an object. It's overloaded the terminology so that we use the asterisk much like we use an asterisk for pointer. So we use dereferencing, we use pointer, because it is technically pointing to something inside of the object, inside the container. All right, let's see what we need to do to loop over this vector using the iterators. So I can get it, I start at the beginning, so I'm still in a for loop. I'm already regretting typing this. This is the type. Oh my gosh. Okay. This is the complete type. Who wants to type that? Int is just an index. It's just a number. Iterator is an object. I can do things with that object. That is the actual type, but I'm going to type auto because I hate typing. So you need to know what the type is. How do I assign a value? I don't assign 0 to it. I assign the begin, I call begin, and I assign it to this variable. So I start at the beginning. Now with the regular for loop, I will loop while the index is less than the size. I'm not going to do less than because less than doesn't really mean that much to different containers. But what we do is we say iterator not equal to the menu item in. If we get to the end, we've gone past the last one, and we can stop. With what? It's better to say not equal to the end. And then I increment my iterator just like I increment the index. Okay. So this is what I mean by it's wordier. There's more typing you have to do. Okay. And in some cases, it's not worth the extra typing. Look how much more typing that is than just the range-based loop. Okay. And I still don't have the item. I still have to do something extra to get to the actual item in the vector. How do I get to the actual item in the vector? I use the dereferencing operator, the iterator. It's just more complicated. Yeah. No, the array is not a standard library container. You can do the pointer for an array. Point to the first item in the array and then do pointer plus plus and move to the next item. Okay, Three kinds of loops we got here. For those of you who just say, I just only want to use a for loop, I'd encourage you to try to learn the others. Which one am I going to look for? I don't care. Okay. Let's actually print out our menu, see what's on it. So after we add items to our menu, this is a non-static method, so I use the cafe.show. It's going to show the menu 3 times with a different header each time. Oh man, this is messed up with the other print options that are going on. I need to, I'll change that in a second. Okay, there's our for loop, there's our for each, and there's our iterator loop. Well, that's not part of the iterator loop. That's these other print statements going on down here. Oops. I know what I can do. I can just print. Press enter after this. All right. Okay, there's our 3 loops. Same result each time. Solve the problem, some solutions. A lot of times in software, there's different paths to the solution. A lot of times those paths are equivalent. Sometimes some paths are better than others. The more experience you get, the more you'll be able to recognize when one path is better than another. Questions about this, especially iterators? Why do we need to learn iterators? Why can't we just use the other 2 loops? Yeah. Because an iterator is an object, it's not an index. Begin returns an iterate to the first item that's in the vector. Index 0 well, this is just an integer. It could mean an index. It could mean something different, right? So we'll use it, when you use an iterator, you actually use an object that's pointing to something inside the actual container. Yes? This start iterator is saying, give me the value that you are pointing to. That's what the start iterator is saying. That's a good question. What are the other things we can do with an iterator? The whole reason why we're talking about iterators is because what we need to do with an iterator. Okay. I don't know if they fixed this. In PG1, we used to have a slide on how to erase from a vector, and it was incorrect. Hopefully they fixed it. I don't know if they have. No, because they're using an index. And if erase with an index doesn't work. It's on one slide and it's not correct. Okay. You need an iterator to erase something from a vector. So the whole reason why we're using iterators is we need to erase from a vector. And how do we erase from a vector? We need the iterator to the item we want to erase. Okay, so let's say I want to erase something. Which one of these does not belong? No, teas are okay. In fact, we should probably drink tea more often. Bagel seems too healthy. We should probably drop bagel. Nobody likes bagels anyway. Bagels are only people that they don't want to pretend to eat healthy. Right? If you really like bagels, I'm just a joke. It's gotta can't be a plain bagel. It's gotta have something on it. Which is, who needs a plain bagel? If you eat a plain bagel, I'm sorry. Okay. How would I go about erasing this particular item? What is the index of bagel in this particular vector? 0, 1, 2, 3. So it would be index 3. Okay. Let's write a method to erase something from our menu. Void, erase item. Let's pass in the item we want to erase. Let's say, let's erase something. Item to erase. This is our declaration, okay? Let's create a definition for this. Now, I need to find where this item is in our vector. I need to know the index of it, or I need the iterator to the item. But what if it's not on it? I need to look for it, right? So I'm going to loop over. I'm going to use a for loop instead. Menu items. Size. What I do here, I need to compare, right, the item in the vector with the item I want to erase. So I need some kind of if condition. If item to erase is equal to the menu item at I. Okay, I have, if this is true, then I have the index to the item I want to erase. So why can't I just say menu items erase with the I? Red line. Below your filter. Okay. Who can read these error messages? Can anybody read that? Tell me what's wrong. No, I give up reading these sometimes, to be honest. Too many square brackets, too many standard allocator. Sometimes these things are impossible to read, right? It does not work if I just pass it an index, an integer. Erase requires an iterator, okay? Erase requires an iterator. How do I get an iterator to this item? Yeah. Yes, I can use the index. If I start at the beginning, menu items.begin plus the index. So I start at the beginning and say move to this index, and it'll erase it. Now, if I erase the item, do I want to keep going? Yeah, we need to get out of the loop, right? Break or return. I like break more. What if I was looping with an iterator though? I'll show you, I'll copy this iterator loop and show you what it would look like if we loop with an iterator. So here, I would need to check this, I need to do this check again. Well, what do I check it with? I don't have an index anymore, I have an iterator. I need to do the star iterator to get to the item, to do the comparison. But when it comes time to erase, I already have the iterator to the item. Let's just simply say erase with the iterator. Okay. So two ways. Erase requires an iterator. There's no way around it. So it was sad to hear that the PowerPoint slide still isn't. It's only one slide, right? You probably didn't have to erase from it. Okay. You're gonna have to erase from the vector today. Foreshadowing. Just so here's a little tip. If we cover it in a lecture, you're likely gonna have to do it in the lab. Okay? It seems too obvious, but sometimes when we cover references and cons, students don't use it. I'm like, what can we cover for this stuff? Okay. Oh yeah, you're gonna have to use const this month. Const is constant. It's always constant. Const is one of those things that makes your code go from good to great. What's that? We'll cover all the meaning of const on Wednesday. If you ever get code from a big company like Google or Microsoft or Facebook, if you ever see their code, it's written very well. There's a lot of const everywhere. Okay. Let's actually call this method cafe erase item coffee erase bagel. Nobody's bought it in 3 months, so let's get it off the menu. Let's prove that it erased it. Let's show our menu again, okay? Just to prove that it's no longer there. Okay, first time through, bagel was on there. We erased it. Bagel's no longer there. Sorry, bagel lovers. When it's time for you to get your code into GitHub, you're ready to submit your work for the week, your lab, you can just follow a process, okay? So your code is currently on your laptop, you want to get that code up to GitHub, and then you want to download that zip file from GitHub, and that's what you're going to submit to FSO. Okay, so the first step is getting that code up to GitHub.
First step is
So we'll use this code as an example from data. So what we want to do is, want to go to the Git Changes tab. If you don't see it on the right-hand side over here in Visual Studio, what you want to do is go to Git or the View menu and select Git Changes. Okay, so under View, select Git Changes, and it'll show the Git Changes tab. All right, and it'll list the files that you've changed in the repo. So when you're ready to submit, you go to the Git Changes. First step is you have to enter in a message into this text box. So usually that's whatever you've been working on. So I'm just going to do a sample commit. All right. So that's the first step. This is part of required. Then you need to click the commit all button. So when you click that, it's going to work for a little bit. It's going to say a commit was created locally. Okay, so then you'll see at least one outgoing number here. So that means you made changes locally, but they're still not up in GitHub. And the third step you do is press this up arrow, that's for a push. Okay, so click the up arrow. It's going to say initiating push, and it's going to work for a little bit. So this part is required. All right, so that's first. All right, and it'll list the files that you changed in the repo. So when you're ready to submit, you go to the Git Changes. First step is you have to enter in a message into this text box. So usually that's whatever you've been working on. So I'm just going to do a sample commit. All right, so that's first step. This is part is required. Then you need to click the commit all button. So when you click that, it's going to work for a little bit. It's going to say a commit was created locally. Okay, so then you'll see at least one outgoing number here. So that means you may change it locally, but they're still not up in GitHub. Then the third step you do is press this up arrow, that's for a push. Okay, so click the up arrow. It's going to say initiating push. You'll see this little thing down in the bottom left saying it's working in the background. It's going to work for a little bit doing its job. And then you'll eventually see a message over here and it changes saying successfully pushed to origin master. Okay? So those are the 3 steps that you need to do to get your code from your laptop into GitHub. Now, if you encounter any problems doing that, you need to talk to your course director so that you can work out those problems. Donuts are just a happy bagel. Oh, yeah. Why don't they put like frosting on top of bagels? People would love them. Sometimes they put like the little like cinnamon or cinnamon sugar on top. Right? What happens if I passed in capital B bagel? Check. Uh-oh. Bagel's still on there. What does that tell you? Double equals is case sensitive. What do you have to do for the lab? It's got to be case insensitive. I'm not going to show you how to do that. There are, sometimes what we do in the lab instructions, we'll say, use this. There's a link to it. I suggest you follow the link. Okay. Sometimes we expect you to kind of research something and learn how to use it. Research something is not ChatGPT, by the way. It depends. It depends how you use ChatGPT. To be honest, going to ChatGPT on any of the AIs and saying, how do I use this function in a general sense is okay. Because that's a general kind of question. It's not, here's the instructions to lab 1, give me the working solution. That's the wrong way to use AI. The right way is to say, hey, how do I use RAND? It's going to give you a good explanation of RAND. Okay, yeah. Random is who's in B1? What? I was? Oh, PG1, yeah. PG1 uses a different random generator. I use RAND. It's just smaller and easier. Yeah, it's a pseudo-random generator. Is anything fully random? How do we know? Anyway, they have to use something to seed it. Okay. Erase requires an iterator. Learn what iterators are. We're going to use them next week again. We're going to use them this week. Okay. Iterators. Vectors. So anything with vectors we didn't cover. Pushback. You can use insert, but you don't need to use insert this week. Yeah. Notice you can use it. Insert uses what? An iterator. Okay. Where to put it? If you don't put the number here, it's just going to put it at the beginning. What we're adding. 15 is the number we're putting into the vector. You can use popback, but popback is only going to remove the last one. So it's going to remove 40. Erase, if you want to erase. You can also erase a range, but you don't need to erase a range in PG2. Iterating interesting is iterating is also used to say you're looping over something. I tend to say looping because I don't want to confuse it with iterators, but auto is a good thing to kind of keep you from having to type things and make a mistake. We'll talk about capacity and reserve and copying next time, okay? All right, what do you have to do for the lab? So in your, for instance, if you're in day one, sometimes when you go back and forth, looking at the sample code, looking at lab code, you would need 2 Visual Studios open at the same time. I tend to have a lot of Visual Studios open, especially when I'm working on multiple projects. Now, I would recommend you do that. Okay, so you'll need to load up lab 1. Where is my thing? Okay. I'll bring up the repo, show you similar. So let's say you're in lab 1. I showed some of you this little trick. So let's say you're in day 1. I want to go to lab 1. This little button at the top of Solution Explorer allows you to switch between all the solutions in your repo. So if you want to jump to lab 1, then scroll down, you'll see the lab 1 solution. You can double click it and it'll open up lab 1. This little button at the top of Solution Explorer, switch between solutions. Now, you might want to keep both open, so you can still use another instance of Visual Studio to open up the lecture code so you can toggle back and forth. If you're like me, I do that a lot. See down at the bottom, I got lots of Visual Studios open right now. Okay. So let's see, what do you need to do for the lab for part A? So you're gonna be working on part A today. I'm gonna run the teacher repo. No, I'll show you this. Visual Studio. So there's some sample code in the lab that's going to show you how to access some information about a hero object. You're going to be given a vector of hero objects. These hero objects have lots of information in them, okay? So this particular initial part right before the menu code shows you kind of how to get to information inside of a hero object, some sample code, okay? So what am I referring to? Let me open up. No, that's wrong. Did I close it already? No, I didn't. So, Heroes V1, I can't show you the teacher code, I'll show you the student code. Here's what I'm talking about, the sample code that shows you how to access some information on a hero object, okay? My recommendation is go to the header files, open up this hero.h, and explore it for a while. There's a bunch of structures here above the hero object, the hero class. And then there's a bunch of getters that you're going to need to use. Okay? We'll talk about virtual week 3. Okay, so this is some sample code in Heroes V1 to show you how to use those getters to get some details on the hero. Okay? So, what are you going to work on today? You're going to work on these 3 menu options. So show heroes is just showing all the heroes in the vector, their IDs and their names. Okay, there's plenty of heroes in here. Eagle Eye students will recognize that there are some missing IDs. That is okay. Don't freak out. This is internet data. I got it from the internet, so I don't know who created it. All right, so let's remove a hero. Obviously, we gotta remove Aquaman. That's where we should always start. Aquaman's removed. If I did that again,
It's not necessary for me to say this, but I'm gonna say it anyway. If you notice, if you pay attention to what he said about the hero data,
are some missing IDs. That is okay.
listen.
Don't freak out. This is internet data. I got it from the internet, so I don't know who created it.
Now, every day that I've been in class, this is the kind of stuff that they give me a 0 for. But all of a sudden, the instructor is doing the very thing that he's teaching us not to do. The very thing that they're trying to teach us to do is the very thing that he said that he just did. It's because of him that I don't know who's in. Like every little thing that he keeps saying, don't do. This is how you're gonna get reprimanded. Is what he's doing. I'm only saying this because in my 2 cents, self-improvement through self-education, and I've decided to focus my brain on the understanding that racism exists and classism is a problem. This is how it works. This is how it works. What's the point? Like I've said 1,000 times for anyone that actually has watched my video, what is the point in us teaching children how to behave and function as adults if we're not expected to actually engage in that behavior? Why are you teaching me how to have ethics or morality and legality and using that to punish me for trying to do the thing that I'm trying? I don't want to. I'm not at Full Sail to learn how to be a decent person. I'm at Full Sail to learn how to program. So why do I get graded down for everything outside of me learning how to program? And he just said that as an instructor, doing his job, the thing that he's teaching us not to do is the thing that he did to get the piece of material that he's using to instruct us with. But you'll give us a 0 if we don't cite a reference. If we don't do those things, you give us 0s. There's a difference between giving somebody a adequate grade for doing something and giving them a 0. They're only giving us 0s to create the disparity and the minorities, right? Because they don't have to give us a 0. They can choose to grade us how they feel. And when they look at your profile picture, that will determine if you'll get a 0 or if you'll just get a 61 to pass. And that's literally that's literally why I'm pausing the video right now. Because you've listened to him. If you've been watching, you've been listening to him state over and over and over again the importance of doing things a certain way. And he literally just said, oh, I just grabbed this information off the internet. I didn't even take the time as an instructor to make sure it was correct. I just grabbed it off the internet because I don't really care. And I'm not going to credit the original author because who knows who he is and it doesn't matter. It's off the internet. But you spend half your lecture saying, don't use ChatGPT, don't cheat, don't do things don't do things that's going to make life easier for you. Make sure you're always doing stuff the hard way. I don't understand. I don't get it. I really don't get it. I don't understand why it's okay for you to do it after you've graduated, but it's not okay for you to do it while you're trying to actually learn to graduate. But then you use this kind of stuff not to show that somebody isn't capable, but to prove that they're not qualified or that they don't have the right to do it. And that's the part that bothers me. That's the part that focuses. That's the part in the My 2 Cents brand that I'm trying to focus on. Because I have all types of stuff I have to do in my life just to be able to sit here at my computer, to spend time, to have to fight against unnecessary bullshit that's going to stop me from learning how to program. For what? For like, what is it? What do I gain or what do I lose from that? But you heard him. You heard what he just said. Like, I didn't put those words in his mouth. He's the instructor. He's in charge. He didn't have to reveal any of that stuff. We wouldn't have known that he didn't type this and that he got off the internet. He just said that shit. He said it out loud. But I literally have been being educated. Don't plagiarize. Don't steal things off the internet. Don't take other people's work. He just said don't copy your students' work, because if you copy a student's work, then three people will turn in the same. This is when I was cooking. 3 people will turn in the same thing and they'll all have the same mistake, and that's how I will know that you guys are cheating off each other. But guess what? My brain remember that shit because I'm 43, but it won't remember the stuff that's relevant to the questions they're asking. But then you want me to understand that there's something wrong with me. No, I'm a human being, and humans are gonna human. But you shouldn't use my humanity against me to stop me from doing something that I want to do. There's no reason for that.
All right, so let's remove a hero. Obviously, we got to remove Aquaman. That's where we should always start. Aquaman's removed. If I did that again, Aquaman was not found. Okay, we're successful. Well, what if there's more than one Aquaman? I need to find all the heroes that start with a prefix. All right, there's two more we gotta eliminate. There's always some Aquaman, somebody who likes Aquaman. Let's get into this little. I'd make fun of Aquaman, why not? Easy. Okay. I like Aquaman, I grew up with Aquaman, so it's kind of like the friend groups, you know, the friend groups that seem toxic, but they all seem to laugh and have fun making fun of each other. I don't know. It's like that. Okay, so remove hero should work. Case insensitive. Okay, you shouldn't care how you type it. Okay. Where we should might stop working. Arrow. Admitted. He did you can. All right, lap trick. Saying get code out of the loop. Let's see what we need to do. How would I get it? Something that's called an error. Reserve and can I close it? Or okay, there's plenty. There's always some Aquaman, somebody who likes Aquaman, that fits into this rule. I'd make fun of Aquaman, why not? Hate it. Okay. I like Aquaman, I grew up with Aquaman, so it's kind of like the friend groups, you know, the friend groups that seem toxic, but they all seem to laugh and have fun, making fun of each other. I don't know. It's like that. Okay, so remove hero should work case insensitive. Okay, shouldn't care how you type it in. So we show you a method to use in the instructions. It's intentional, okay? A lot of times you're gonna get things that say, use this, but they're not gonna show you how to use it, or so you're gonna have to do some research. Starts with, we provide a function, let me see, in the code. Let me make sure this is the student. Yeah, this is the student repo, can't show you all. Okay, so we provide a function is prefix to check if one string starts with another string, okay? You can use this one. The other one is we show you a different method that's part of the library to use for checking if two strings are equal. This checks a prefix. So here's where you're going to add your methods. You're going to add a lot of methods this month to classes. Today you're going to add 3 methods. Well, if you finish it all today. Okay. You should put your declarations here, then your definitions in the CPP file. Don't edit the code below. You edit the code below, it might stop working. If it doesn't stop working, but you edit it anyway, it makes us suspicious. Why did you edit that code? Where'd you get this code from? And then I start poking in, looking closer. I get all squinty at it. It's like, what's going on here? Okay. So, the practice of splitting definition and declaration, writing some code, accessing a vector, doing some research on some methods, okay? Research that hero object. Questions? I expect you to have questions. I know, I've been there. So I'm like, that looks obvious. I go to do it, it doesn't work. I was like, I thought I understood, I guess I don't. Where is he now to explain it to me? He's not here. That's what the lab instructors are there for, right? Let me highlight something in the instructions, okay? So you start working on the instructions. There's some helper classes where we talk about the input and console class again. After you finish the show heroes, or after every section, you're going to see this comment. So when you finish part A1, commit and push.
Oh, that makes sense.
There are 7 different sections in Lab 1. I should see at least 7 different commits. It's okay if you commit something and you realize it's not working later. It's okay to go back, edit your code, do a new commit, okay? So I'm looking for at least 7 commits.
Open. So
Questions?
GitHub 1125. Oh, so should be this.
Think you can do it? Think you can do it. Okay. If questions pop up or when questions pop up in lab today, just ask the lab instructors. Sometimes they get a little salty. Right? Sometimes I'm like, did I say something wrong? That's not, okay. It's your degree, right? It's your path. So some people can have bad days. I've been there before, right? But ask questions. Can I give another demo of committing? All right, I've been working in our lecture code today, right? I haven't committed in a while. Bad teacher, bad teacher. Okay, I've got some changes. I need to get it up to GitHub. What do? Is I open the Git Changes tab. If you haven't seen the Git Changes tab, if it's not there, you accidentally close it. Like, oh no, where'd it go? It's under View. It's not under Git. That would be too obvious.
Please leave your message for 3603147.
We'll just go over there at midnight. At 12
Under View,
at 9 o'clock.
select Git Changes. Why is it under Git? To be honest, I don't know. This is not my application. So open up Git Changes. You'll see some files that have been changed. Make some commit message, right? Looping, erasing. Hit the commit all button. And then the up arrow. All 3 steps must be done, okay, to get it to GitHub. So if I click the up arrow, it pushes it. It's going to work for a second, communicating, eventually comes back successful. Guess what happens if I click it again? It's going to do that work again, and it's going to say successful, even though nothing happened. So you have to have changes, you have to put a message, you have to commit it, and you have to push it. This is most likely new for most of you, this part, okay? So just get used to it. That's why we're asking you to do it a lot, so you get used to it. If we close the Solution Explorer, oh no, my cat jumped on the keyboard. Close my Solution Explorer, right? Cats are evil. They will do that, right? View Solution Explorer. We defeated you, cat. You have not gotten rid of it. Sometimes I like cats. It can be mean. Just a sleeping dog and the cat is coming right in the head. Like, what's up, cat? Of course, dogs can be bad too. Okay. It's all new, right? Depending on your experience level, you got a lot of experience. This is easy. For those of you new, you're like, this is easy. I've had students took my course, come back 6 months later and say, hey, when I went through your course, it was so hard, but now when I think about it, it seems so easy. That's the way it's going to be, okay? It's always hardest at the beginning. Cut yourself some slack because the world won't do it. All right. All right, lab starts at 1. Go get some lunch, take a break, warm up. It's also code, isn't it? Okay. I will see you on Wednesday. We're going to finish up week 1 on Wednesday. Okay? And if you have any questions, you can ping me in Discord. All right? I'll see you on Wednesday. Actually, we don't need to start yet. Something that you weren't allowed to do in PG1. That if you don't do as a coder, you won't have good code. Okay. So why did they tell you not to do it in PG1? Probably because it's a little bit more beyond PG1. It's not a basics, all right? So the thing is, if you use a lot of AI and you rely a lot on AI, it will give you code using references, okay? Which it should, because it's a good way of doing things. But for PG1, it's beyond PG1, so they use that as an indication you were using too much outside help. Not that references are bad, but that you shouldn't be using them yet, okay? Now, what is a reference? Has anybody looked at the markdown that we provided for you? It could be a helpful way to kind of go back to a topic, review a topic for quizzes or whatever, or just for deeper dive. All right. References in C++. Variables just hold values, right? If I create a variable, I'm going to assign a value to it. When I create a reference, I'm actually saying this is not a new variable, it's an alias to another variable. Okay, so I'm creating a new name for an existing variable. So it's a special kind of variable. Under the hood, it's just treated like a pointer. We'll talk about pointers in week 3, but a reference is an interesting kind of variable. Now, in a local scope, a reference really isn't going to gain you that much. It really becomes handy when you're trying to go cross scope kind of a situation. Let's take a quick look at that. So let's just talk about what a reference is in general. So if I create a variable, an integer, and assign it a value of 5. When you create a variable, the type goes first, your name, and then you have a choice of assigning a value or not. When I create a reference, I use this little symbol here, the ampersand, to say this is going to be a reference to an integer variable. So nref. Now, because I'm creating a variable that's supposed to be pointing to another variable or another name for another variable, I must assign it, I must tell the compiler what that other variable is, right? I can't just say you're an alias without telling it what it's an alias to. So I can't put a semicolon here. I get a nice little red underline, a little tiny one under the semicolon, okay? Which, if you're not zoomed in, sometimes I see some students kind of like this, and I'm like, man, I must be getting old because I can't see your screen. But you must tell the compiler what the other variable is. So let me assign it to tell it that nref is really another name for this other variable. So if you punch Batman, you're punching Bruce, right? Because Batman is Bruce, all right? So if I change nref, set it equal to 10, and then print out n, what should I see? I should see 10, because nref is really another name for n. I punched Batman, so I punched Bruce as well. I don't have to punch Bruce a second time, okay? So I see 10, all right? That's what you need to know. A reference is really changing another variable if you change that reference variable. Let's say I created, yes. What's that? They can't reference each other. Okay, because when I create a reference, I have to tell it what it's an alias to. So the other one can't be an alias to the second. I can create a vector reference to another vector. If I set a vector equal to another vector, it's going to make a copy of the vector. Yeah. If I create another variable here, here's a little caveat, set it equal to 20. What happens if I do this? What goes on here? What do you think? Nilo says it's going to make a reference to into. Yeah. Yes, that's actually what's going to happen. It's not going to make a new reference. It's simply going to copy into to in ref, which is also in. Okay. So you can only set the reference when you create the variable. I can't see that now. Let me put it up here. So that's the only time I can set the reference. After that, it's like I'm using the variable directly. I'm not setting the reference. That's different than a pointer. We'll talk about pointers week 3.
It's
Pointers, when you create them, you can
time for me to
change
go
them
for a run.
anytime to point to something else. References, you can't do that. Once you create the reference, that's it. It's set.